Finance Minister reaches out to the Congress leaders over the Goods and Services Tax Bill, meets former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Sources say the centre is even open to revisiting the 1% manufacturing tax. That's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive.
Even as Maggi gears up for competition for Baba Ramdev's Patanjali noodles, the Central Food Regulator ramps up pressure, moves the Supreme Court against the Bombay High Court's order lifting the ban on the 2-minute noodles.
ICICI Bank sells a stake in its life insurance business. Premji Investment Trust and Temasek subsidiaries shell out 1,950 crores for a 6% stake, valuing ICICI Prudential Life Insurance at 32,500 crore rupees.
Exports fall for the 11th straight month, even as trade deficit shrinks below $10 billion in October. But gold imports provide some respite, falling nearly 60%.
Terrorism is a major threat to the global economy, say world leaders at the G20 summit after the attacks on Paris pledged to combat terror financing and add 2% to global GDP by 2018.
France identifies Belgium-born extremist Abdel Hamid Abad as the alleged mastermind behind the attacks in Paris. Over 100 arrests made in raids across the country. French jets also bomb ISIS strongholds in Syria.
Reliance Infra is set to sell 49% stake in its Mumbai power distribution business to a Canadian pension fund. The move is aimed at reducing the company's mammoth 24,000 crore rupee debt burden.
Pearl Agro is treading the same path as Sahara, says the Supreme Court. Transfer all pending cases to itself as pressure mounts on the company to refund 49,000 crore rupees to nearly 6 crore investors.
Top automakers knock on the finance minister's doors, seek to end differential excise duty regime at different states, calling it illogical. Well, it's the worst spell of rainfall to hit Tamil Nadu in a decade. 71 people are dead and 43 are from the coastal Cuddalore district. The Met Department has warned of more rainfall. So if you're in Chennai or coastal Tamil Nadu, stay indoors and stay safe. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour. Hi, Nandara.
Hi, Shireen. Schools and colleges were shut today in Tamil Nadu, and they still will remain shut tomorrow, obviously.
And the state government has, in fact, now allocated 500 crore rupees for flood relief. Many on social media slamming the state for the lack of preparedness. We will get you a ground report from Chennai in just a bit, but before that, here's a quick check of the action on the Lal Street. The Bulls did manage to shrug off the early morning weakness and ended the day with some healthy gains. The Nifty gained about 40 points. It's back above the 7,800 mark, and the Sensex surging nearly 150 points. It's now moves closer to 26,000 levels. Mid-caps underperforming in trade, with the mid-cap index ended with marginal loss. And then, Tara, you were at the CLSA summit in Delhi today, and the word there from Chris Wood and CLSA continues to be overweight India.
Yes, structurally overweight is one of the better performing equity markets in the world. Interestingly, Shireen, we did see a bit of a difference between Chris Wood's stake and the chief economist Rajiv Malik's stake. So while Chris Wood believes that the RBI is going to cut by 200 basis points between 2015 and 2016, Rajiv Malik on camera did say that don't expect a rate cut for a long time. It's going to be a small one.
All right, so let's look at what happened at the CLSA conference today.
No Fed rate hike this year, and I'm expecting more QE next year.
So like I said, we think the Fed will actually raise rates in December, and our expectation is that there's going to be a gradual pace. That to us is quarter percentage point per quarter.
An interesting day one with divergent views also coming in from the top honchos of CLSA. As for the markets and the economy, CLSA is overweight on India. Influential market maker Chris Wood says he's overweight on only two economies in Asia, India and the Philippines. He did go on to say investments are not going to pick up unless the government rages a war against non-performing loans.
My view is that it's probably conservative to assume that about 15% of loans in India are stressed in one form or another. Most of those stressed loans are in the state-owned banks, and So long as that's the situation, that will delay a pickup in the investment cycle in India.
CLSA also believes the government will meet this year's fiscal deficit target of 3.9%, but adds the exchequer may miss FY17's target.
The windfall from oil will not be there, plus there will be the added pressure from the pay commission impact. So it's going to be extremely challenging. I personally would be extremely surprised if the government stuck to FY17 fiscal deficit target.
What's more, Rajiv Malik is part of that club which believes India's GDP data is not in sync with ground reality.
7% or 7.5% growth economies have a certain momentum. Indicators capture that. You see that missing in India.
Corporate earnings, CLSA says, is at an all-time low and cautions there is more pain in store. Nevertheless, the firm does expect the markets to deliver 15% compounded growth over the next 2 years.
Unless the property markets revive, the overall capex cycle cannot revive. So therefore, the process will have to be gradual. But on an overall basis, we expect, as I said, about 30% market returns over the next 2 years.
The message from CLSA is clear. Strengthen the banking system, even if it means privatizing banks. Be realistic about the fisc. Decide quickly what's more important, pump priming the economy or a fiscal deficit target. As far as corporates go, don't expect a major upswing in capex for 2 years. In New Delhi, Nayantara Rai.
All right, so that's the view coming in from CLSA Overweight India. But on to the big CNBC TV 18 exclusive tonight. As the winter session of Parliament draws near, the government is trying to build bridges with the opposition. This in order to avoid a replay of the monsoon session, which was a washout. CNBC TV 18 learns the Finance Minister has already started reaching out to the opposition parties on the GST bill. Sapna, who broke that story, standing by with the details now. Sapna, who all has the Finance Minister reach out to? And is the government willing to incorporate at least some of the changes suggested specifically by the Congress Party?
Well, the signals are very clear. There is an out-and-out dialogue which is on. This is a process that has been reignited by the Finance Minister, Arun Jaitley. So basically, he has met the former Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, for a smooth passage on the GST bill in the coming winter session of Parliament. He has also met some other leaders of the Congress. He's also open to approaching the Bihar CM, Mr. Nitish Kumar, and trying to garner his support as well on the GST bill, which was there earlier also. So this is a consultative process which is definitely on as of now. In terms of the specifics, in terms of the specifics on the GST bill itself, what all is open to negotiation, well, the government does have an open mind as of now. 3 aspects which are well known. A, putting the rate, the GST rate into the bill itself. The second, the 1% manufacturing tax. And third, the dispute resolution authority to be brought back into the bill. On the second aspect, at least, the government does have a very open mind. So it is possible that the 1% manufacturing tax that may actually be revisited. On its part, the government is very clear that they are committed to giving 100% compensation to those manufacturing states which may get affected in case the 1% manufacturing tax is dropped. In the meanwhile, the CA panel headed by Dr. Arvind Subramanian himself, of course, has also been requested to give an early, quick interim report on the revenue neutral rate for GST, because there are other aspects also that the panel is looking into, for example, the impact of GST on various sectors of the economy, state revenues, so on and so forth. But this is R&R is the next big critical step for the government. And of course, the third aspect, a smaller one but equally important, the State Finance Ministers panel will be meeting in the capital this week on 20th November. The agenda is basically discussion on the business processes, but we do understand that in terms of who are the likely contenders for the new GST panel chief, well, it could be the Karnataka State FM or even the West Bengal State FM as well.
Amit Mitra is the West Bengal Finance Minister, and he spent a great part of his time at FICCI lobbying for the GST. So let's see who wins that battle. But Sapna, appreciate you joining us. Now, speaking of taxes, this Diwali brought a new dhamaka for India Inc. The government announced the levy of a 0.5% Swachh Bharat cess on all taxable services. To be clear, this levy was proposed in the budget itself, but no date was determined then. So on the 6th of November, the CBEC issued a notification saying the cess would be levied effective 15th of November. And so starting yesterday, the service tax rate has increased from 14% to 14.5%. But like in all things tax, this levy has stirred a controversy regarding the lack of notice, unanswered questions, and most importantly, the lack of input credit. Minka joins us now with more details. Minka, why is industry complaining?
Well, there are three particular pain points, and let me take you through them in very simple language. The first one is lack of adequate notice, which you referred to in your introduction as well. The notification, as pointed out, was issued on November 6th, just the weekend before the Diwali week. It said the tax was effective 15th November. That was the Diwali week, and most people were on holiday. Now, a cess of this nature needs changes to ERP systems, all kinds of systems, and companies simply have not had enough time to make those changes and be ready to start implementing the tax from the 15th of November, which was yesterday. So that's the first pain point. The second one is confusion. At the first instance, the notification that's on 6th November simply said that the levy applies from 15th November. Then, based on industry representations and questions, the CBEC clarified nuances, and that clarification came on November 11th, just 4 days before the effective tax date. For instance, in that clarification, it was said that services that pay an alternate rate of tax, and there are several such services, will also pay an alternate rate of cess. That clarification was very important. But it's only through the FAQs, which were issued even later, that's over last weekend, that more clarity was available. And that's when industry found out that there is no SENVAT credit available on this Swachh Bharat cess. And that brings me to the third pain point. There is no input credit available on this tax. So it has a cascading effect, which means the effective tax rate is marginally more than the 14.5% on paper, and it's a direct hit to the bottom line of companies, besides hurting consumers, of course. So there are these three pain points. There is also confusion around what this says about impending GST, something that we've been talking about over the last 24 hours, if not the last 24 months. Will the service tax rate keep rising till it hits 16 or 18%, whatever that GST rate is, the revenue neutral rate that Sapna's been referring to? The cess itself is less than what was proposed in the budget. The finance minister had then said the cess would be 2%, only 0.5% is levied. So will the remaining 1.5%, which is currently exempt, be levied later, next month, 2 months later, 6 months later? Will the service tax rate keep rising? Now, that's like paying GST rates without GST benefits. So these unanswered questions have filled businesses with unease, and that's not good news for a government that's focused on the ease of doing business. Here's what experts had to say to me.
I really feel that with CSR, with the Swachh Bharat, and so many other things that is being imposed, at a time when economy is in a critical situation, there is a lot of pressure on economy to come back up, and then it's just that businesses are just coming up. There's so much of liquidity crunch in the market. To do something like this really goes not in the best way for putting the economy back on track. So I, for one, have never been an advocate of increasing your taxes in this manner.
The fundamental fact is SBC was known that it was coming. The only thing I would have expected is brought it in a time period where somebody could implement it correctly, come up with that so-called Swachh, the credit mechanism, and still people would have borne with it, because this was something that they had made public in the last budget. I don't believe they're going to increase service tax rates to a rate of 18 in the interim before GST. I don't believe that will happen, in my view. If GST comes around, that could be one of the potential rates, so we still don't know what the rates are going to be. But I don't believe in the interim they will go and increase the rates to that high in service tax, because that would definitely be inflationary.
All right, a new week and a new tax talking point. With that, I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, thanks very much, Menka. So tax woes continue, one kind or the other. Now, the other big exclusive tonight. Legal hassles for Maggi noodles don't end. Just a week after Nestle India relaunched the instant noodles, the food regulator has now moved the Supreme Court, challenging the Bombay High Court, which had lifted the FSSAI ban. Ashmi joins us with the details. Ashmi, the food regulator isn't keen to go down without a fight. Instead of the Maharashtra state government, which was what was expected, it's now the FSSAI that's moved the Supreme Court.
Indeed, the Central Food Regulator not letting up, clearly picking a fight here, and this time in the Apex Court. That's where they filed the application. And what's interesting here is that the decision to file an application and the actual filing of the application was done later this evening, or just late this afternoon, and that importantly happened after a high-profile meeting with the Attorney General, where he has consented with the FSSAI. He agreed that he's on the same page, that there is merit, there is weight behind the challenge that the FSSAI has proposed, and he's thrown his weight behind the FSSAI, at least as far as this case is concerned. Coming to the broad contour contours of the application that we're looking at, FSSAI will essentially be raising 3 points. One, they'll be arguing that the category in which Maggi falls is an unstandardized category, and hence that's an area where the food regulator has an absolute domain in terms of prescribing the standards, in this case, of course, lead and MSG. So that's the first argument. The second leg of the argument is that the tests that had been referred to by the Bombay High Court were set aside merely on technical grounds and were not looked upon in terms of merits of those tests. So that's another issue that they'll be raising. The final and perhaps another issue that they'll be red flagging is the fact that the samples that have been offered for testing, for latest testing that we've seen more recently, were offered by Maggi and were not picked by a neutral agency. So these are the broad concerns that they'll be raising. But of course, as you pointed out, FSSAI first of the block, and this happening at a point where the state government, we've seen a lot of back and forth with the Maharashtra government mooting over the challenge. So clearly, tough legal times await Maggi in the apex court.
All right, Ashmit, appreciate you joining us with those details. That's Ashmit reporting on a story that he broke. Now, the timing is interesting. Barely a week after Nestle relaunched Maggi noodles after a 3-month ban, Yoga Guru Baba Ramdev's indigenous instant noodles has hit the market. Baba Ramdev has decided to take the battle to MNCs, pricing his noodles 10 rupees cheaper than the competition. Not just noodles, Patanjali has also launched Power Vita to take on Cadbury's flagship Born Vita. Shweta Kothari says the Baba is also evoking the spirit of Swadeshi to woo customers.
Barely a week after its relaunch, Nestle's Maggi noodles has a new competitor. Atta noodles from Baba Ramdev's FMCG banner, Patanjali. Interestingly, the noodles carry only the Patanjali brand and sport a generic Atta noodles name. In fact, from a distance, Atta noodles could be mistaken for the market leader with strikingly similar packaging. The tagline, Jhatpat Banao Befikr Khao, also subtly goes after Maggi, bringing in the question of safety at the top of the mind. Priced at 15 rupees for a 70-gram package, the product is 10 rupees cheaper than the Maggi's Atta version.
हमारा कंपटीशन किसी से नहीं है. हमने कहा बाकी सब लोग कमाई के लिए कर रहे हैं, हम भलाई के लिए कर रहे हैं, वो व्यापार के लिए कर रहे हैं, हम उपकार के लिए कर रहे हैं, हम चैरिटी के लिए इस काम को कर रहे हैं. तो हमारा किसी से कोई कंपटीशन ही नहीं है. कंपटीशन तो समान आइडियोलॉजी हो, समान प्रिंसिपल्स हो, समान लोगों की सोच हो, तो हमारी तो सोच सेवा की है.
Patanjali's Atta noodles will be sold through 5,000 Patanjali stores, Big Bazaar and Reliance Fresh across the country. Plans are afoot to take the Patanjali brand global, and Baba Ramdev says production will be ramped up by the end of the next year.
पहले अपने हिंदुस्तान की मार्केट को फिल कर लें. अगले साल विदेशों में भी पतंजलि की धूम मचेगी. हम अपनी प्रोडक्शन कैपेसिटी को और ज्यादा एक्सपेंड कर रहे हैं.
Not just noodles, Patanjali also launched an Indian version of Born Vita called Power Vita and will soon launch its baby care and beauty care products. In Baba Ramdev's own words, the company is all geared up to give major FMCG players in India a run for their money. In New Delhi, Shweta Kothari.
Well, that's Patanjali launching Atta noodles. Now, French President François Hollande is addressing Parliament after the attacks on Paris. Let's listen in.
The face of the dead, the wounded and the families is in my mind. The souvenir fits my resolution, which I know is also yours, and my determination to fight terrorism. France needs to still stay itself. The barbarians who have attacked it will not manage to change its face. They will never manage to damage the French soul. They will never change our lifestyle. We live freely, and we will show it. And I'm thinking about the youth. I think about those who are wounded with all their victims and who are asking themselves questions about their capacity of being able to live in the rule of law. We are going to continue to work. We're going to continue to go out. We're going to continue to live. We're going to continue to influence the world. And this is why the great international event of COP will not only be kept, but it will be a moment of hope and solidarity. Of hope because it is about the future of the planet, and of solidarity because there will be more than 100 heads of states.
Well, that's Francois Hollande speaking in Parliament, talking about the measures that will be taken now to strengthen and beef up security in France. But here's the latest in the investigations in the Paris attacks. Officials have identified the suspected mastermind of the Paris attacks as Belgian national Abdelhamid Aboud. This even as authorities are on the hunt for a Belgian-born French national who's believed to have rented the car used for last week's attacks. The 26-year-old man has been identified as Saleh Abdeslam. French fighter jets have bombed a series of ISIS sites in Raqqa in Syria. French officials have said that 20 bombs were dropped and all the targets have been destroyed. CNBC's Hadley Gamble filed this report on the situation in Paris.
The monuments of Paris, once again, covered with flowers and candles, as the nation attempts to understand how this could have happened again.
People are really, really afraid. They are shocked. They don't understand how could this thing happen.
We couldn't expect something like that happening in Paris and people being killed for having done basically nothing wrong.
But even as this city continues to mourn, French officials are moving quickly. They're talking about changes to the Schengen Agreement. They're also talking about further intelligence sharing, a flight database, as well as a crackdown on terror financing, as well as the sale of illegal firearms. World leaders pausing for a moment of silence as they opened the G20 summit in Turkey, vowed to step up border controls and increase aviation security. Now, as details of the attacks continue to emerge, EU leaders are already facing tough questions over the region's open border policy that many critics now say has to change.
Schengen is under threat, but not because of this recent attack. It is because our exterior border controls don't work or function very poorly. Emphasis must be placed on the reinforcements of the exterior borders.
But for France's president, the message was clear. This is a country at war.
In fact, the terror strike at Paris, as well as the growing ISIS threat, is what dominated the agenda at the G20 summit this year, as world leaders gathered in Antalya to discuss economic issues and geopolitical concerns. So much so, the official communique received by the heads of all the 20 nations recognized terrorism as one of the biggest threats to the global economy. The Syrian crisis also featured in the talks between US President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin, who have finally agreed on the need for UN-negotiated peace talks to facilitate a ceasefire in Syria. US President Barack Obama launched another scathing attack on the Islamic State, saying they are the face of evil.
Now, tragically, Paris is not alone. We've seen outrageous attacks by ISIL in Beirut, last month in Ankara, routinely in Iraq. Here at the G20, our nations have sent an unmistakable message that we are united against this threat. ISIL is the face of evil. Our goal, as I've said many times, is to degrade and ultimately destroy this barbaric terrorist organization.
But even as the top 20 world leaders came together to jointly condemn such acts of terror, it will not be an easy job to crack down on the ISIS and find a mutually acceptable solution to the Syrian crisis. Ali Arouzi of NBC News has been tracking the situation very closely and joins us from Tehran. Ali, the solution is easier said than done, isn't it?
A variety of countries attended the Syria talks in Vienna this weekend, including the United States and America, as well as regional rivals, Saudi Arabia and Iran. But there was nobody representing Syria there, nor from the Assad government or from the opposition. But the diplomats that were there underscored the need to resolve the Syria crisis and said that they were doubling down on their efforts. But the fact remains that there are many different players involved in these talks with a variety of different interests, which is going to make things all the more harder. And the reality is that it's turning into some sort of a sectarian battle there. Iran, with the backing of Russia, supports the Assad regime, and Iran will want any deal reached on Syria to be very Tehran-friendly. Syria, as well as Iraq, are strategically very important to Iran, and they don't want to lose the ground that they've made there over the years. Iran will also want to apply a terrorist label as broadly as it can amongst the Sunni groups that are supported by Saudi Arabia. Now, for their part, the Saudis, who are backed largely by the US, want the removal of Assad before anything else happens there. And they're also very clearly unhappy about Iran's participation in the talks and Iran's wider sphere of influence since they inked the nuclear deal. Now, what all the diplomats in Vienna agreed on is that they need to reconvene in a month to see where they are. By January, they want formal talks between the Syrian government and the opposition, and within 6 months, they want a ceasefire between the two sides and the drafting of a new constitution. And they said within 18 months, there need to be free elections in Syria, monitored by the UN. But just to highlight how far apart the two sides are, over the weekend in Vienna, Secretary Kerry said that Assad had cut a deal with ISIS, the terrorists, and was buying oil from them and not attacking their positions, while Russian Foreign Minister said that he just can't accept that argument. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Ali, for joining us. With that, clearly a solution far, far away. Let's head back home. India's largest private lender, ICICI Bank, today approved the sale of 6% stake in its insurance arm, that's ICICI Prudential Life. The joint venture between ICICI and Prudential is the country's largest private sector life insurer and is valued at over 32,500 crore rupees according to this transaction. CNBC TV Ritu Singh now joining us with more details. Ritu, how much will this transaction fetch the bank? And if I'm not mistaken, ICICI could have sold more than it did.
Well, that's right. The bank has been in discussions for this deal for a long time, and now from the statement released today, we understand that the board of the bank has approved the sale of 6% stake in the life insurance arm, which is ICICI Pru Life, for about 1950 crore rupees. And of the 6% stake, 4% will be sold to Azim Premji Trust, and another 2% will be sold to Temasek Holdings, which of course, after which the entire transaction will value the life insurance business at about 32,500 crore rupees, as you mentioned. But if you compare this with the Fairfax deal in the general insurance space, which the bank announced just last month, that was much above what the markets were valuing. But in this case, this is more or less in line with what the market men were expecting, the 32,500 crore valuation. But of course, there's no timeline given as to when the deal will be closed. There are still regulatory and government approvals that are pending for this deal to be closed. But we do understand from our sources that this deal is likely to be closed by the March quarter. In fact, the MD and CEO of ICICI Bank, Chanda Kochhar, did confirm in an interview earlier to CNBC TV 18 that the bank was indeed looking to monetize its stake in its insurance verticals.
Clearly, we would do some monetizing on at least one of the insurance companies, whether it's listing, whether it's an additional investor or whatever. In that sense, we've not kind of fully made up our mind, but some monetization for sure.
This year itself?
Yeah, I should say at least if March is an artificial cutoff, but yes, within 12 months for sure.
Well, that's what Chanda Kochhar talking about the possibility of monetization, and that has begun. Staying with Deal Street, Anil Ambani promoted Reliance Infrastructure has entered into a non-binding agreement with the Canadian pension fund PSP Investment Fund to sell 49% in its Mumbai power distribution business. Alexander Matthews standing by with the details. Alex, what's the valuation like, and what will Reliance Infrastructure do with the money that it raises? The stock, by the way, was up by about 6% today.
So first off, the new entity that will be created by hiving off Reliance Infrastructure's Mumbai-based power generation, transmission and distribution business will be called Reliance Energy. We've learned that once the due diligence is done, the deal could value Reliance Energy at 15,000 crore rupees, of which the equity component is around 7,000 crore. So Reliance Infrastructure will get around half that is around 3,500 crore from the sale of 49% in Reliance Energy. As of now, Reliance Infrastructure's standalone debt stands at around 16,000 crore. With this deal, 8,000 crore of this debt will shift to the SPV. That's what Reliance Energy has on its books. Also, the 3,500 crore that will be used to reduce debt. So on a standalone basis, Reliance Infra's debt will come down by 11,500 crore rupees, but on a consolidated basis, it will only reduce by 3,500 crores. Remember, this deal has to be seen in conjunction with R-Infra's plan to divest the road and cement businesses in order to pay debt. And if you're wondering what the company will focus on now that Anil Ambani answered that question during the company's last AGM when he told shareholders that the company would now be looking at defense as its core business going forward.
All right, and like Alex was mentioning, the Anil Ambani promoted group has also gone ahead and announced its open offer to acquire an additional stake in Pipavav Defence, with the offer opening on the 2nd of December for Pipavav Defence minority shareholders. Reliance Infra will acquire 18% stake from the present promoters at 63 rupees a share, with the plans of acquiring an additional 26% in the company from the open market at 66 rupees a share. That's Pipavav Defence and Reliance Infra. Coming up next, telcos knock on the telecom department's door with the call drop issue. That and a lot more when we return on India Business Hour Plus.